Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is dialing in today. And I see that we still have some more people slowly joining into the webinar as the system lets them through. So I will take the first couple of minutes to just introduce everybody to the session for today as we continue to have more participants join us. I'd like to first of all welcome you to the information session that is organized by ABPN and the World Bank Group. So my name is Patsy Low, Chief of Staff and Policy Advisor at ABPN. And we're very happy to welcome you today to this information session on the recently launched iSTAR Challenge Fund. For those of you not familiar with ABPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mission is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors and implementers the opportunities to connect with key stakeholders across various sectors and markets and to learn from one another to find opportunities for action. So as part of this mission, ABPN recently had carried out the ABPN South Asia Impact Capital Festival, where we saw a vibrant social investment community come together to address many systemic challenges exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis. One of these was the obvious impact on education and livelihoods on the youth of the region. Zooming in onto India, there is clearly a big challenge to address the growing skills gap and the need to enhance the school to work transition for the youth in the country. So in response to this need, the World Bank launched the iSTAR Challenge Fund at the ABPN South Asia Impact Capital Festival. The iSTAR Challenge Fund looks to surface and support organizations to pilot, scale, or replicate pioneering and creative solutions in skills development, vocational education, and training for the Indian youth to better prepare them for the future of work. So in this third collaboration that ABPN is doing with the World Bank, that with the aim to impact education outcomes in India, we are really proud to be supporting this important initiative of the bank in enhancing the employability, entrepreneurship, and develop skill sets for India's youth to transition successfully from school to work. This kind of collaboration is very much aligned to ABPN's commitment to enable cross-sector dialogue and partnerships between different entities like policymakers and social investors and implementing organizations to achieve collective impact. What is even more exciting about this project is that beyond engaging with the funders and resource providers, we are welcoming implementing partners on the ground to be part of this effort directly. So before we dive into the meat of the session, some very quick housekeeping announcements. Please feel free to go into the chat box and say hello, number one. And number two, if you have any questions about what we're sharing today related to the challenge or any other questions you may have about the program at large, please put them into the Q&A box, which you can see is at the bottom of your screen. If you click a Q&A icon, you can enter your question into that box. We will do our best to answer all questions that we see, although we may not have enough time to get to all of it, but do rest assured that we are going to do our best to provide some written responses to the ones we don't get to today. There are many of you online, so if you do see questions that are resonating with what you would like to ask, feel free to upvote these questions and we can answer them for more parties. Now, before we get our session going, I wanted to run a very quick poll to get the audience's perspective on what are the key priorities that we should be looking at in order to address the skills gap in India. So could I ask my colleagues, please, to launch the poll? What are some of the key priorities for addressing skilling challenges in India? Please select the key priorities that you think we need to look at, ranging from access to quality and relevant education, addressing the supply side bias and demand side inadequacies and skills mismatch, ensuring provision of training in technical and vocational education, bridging the inequitable digital advancement. For those of you who have already submitted your poll, please feel free to pop into the chat box and say hello and introduce yourself and your organization. Excellent. If I could ask for the last few attendees to please put your selection into the poll, and then we can close this poll and take a look at what the results could be. Wonderful. I'm seeing a lot of very interesting friends and organizations here saying hello in the chat box. Great. So I think we've got the bulk of our responses in, and it looks like a very, very close tie here between the top two options that we have provided, that most of you feel that the key priority for addressing skilling challenges in India would be the access to quality and relevant education, and also to address the supply side bias and demand side inadequacies and skills mismatch. I'd love to hear from you as well if you want to put some more comments in the chat box about what you think could be some of these supply side bias or demand side inadequacies, as well as what is to you quality and relevant education. Now, while you are mulling over that, I'm very happy to now introduce to you Ms. Mohini Bhatia, Education and Skills Global Practice Lead from the World Bank Group. And she's the lead for the iSTAR Challenge Grant Program. So we're delighted to have her here bright and early in Washington, D.C. to tell us more about the challenge. So I would like to ask Mohini, please, to unmute your microphone, and my colleagues to please get ready her materials, and we can get going. Mohini, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Patsian, for that. And I'd like to also just share that our head of our program is also online, Shabnam Sinha. And I'm going to maybe get started and see if she would like to come in after we go, or if she's available. Okay, she's on screen. So
no,
Shabnam.
I'm there, but thank you very much, and lovely to see you all people over here in the chat box. Welcome to this event. I would not want to take time from the the discussion around what the challenge fund is about. We will oh, so you have got an opening remark. So anyway, so I'll just give you a brief sense of what the program is about. I'm not sure whether you're aware, we have a new project coming up with the Ministry of Education, Government of India. This is a 500 million loan to the Government of India, and associated with it is this particular grant funding. So, and as you are aware, this grant funding is going to be focused completely on school to work transition, which is vocational education in its various implications, in its various ramifications. We could look at issues around, technology, around, softer skills, which are again very critical, very important. Issues around accountability. How can databases be used for system strengthening in the area of school to work transition? And what is important over here is, I just wanted to make this clear from the very beginning, that you have to work with the state governments. So just your work without the state governments coming into the picture, without the government counterpart being there or a government system being there, will not be very helpful, because we want to scale it up, the innovations that you are doing. So the other two important points, besides what Mohini will be mentioning, is the fact that you have to have government buy-in in whatever you are doing, whatever is the scale of your work, and the fact that the initiative should be sustainable and it can be scaled up. So I do not wish to take any more time. I'll hand over to Mohini to explain the grant to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shabnam, for that, and for stepping away from an important meeting to be able to be here today with all of us. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our session today. And many thanks to our colleagues at AVPN for their commitment to advancing the education agenda and for organizing this session today. As Patsian mentioned, my name is Mohini Bhatia, and I'm part of the Education Global Practice working on India. I, along with several of my colleagues, are on the call today, and we're here to share some information on this exciting new initiative. We're pleased to announce the launch of this iSTAR Challenge Fund this week, as Patsian mentioned. And as Shabnam also mentioned, the focus of this Challenge Fund is mainly to surface innovative models in skills development, vocational education, and training, with the ultimate outcome to enhance employability, entrepreneurship, and develop skill sets for India's youth to succeed in the future of work. Now, what do we mean by the future of work? The nature of work, as all of us know, has been changing. The World Bank's recent publication, the 2019 World Development Report, talks about this in more detail, that the nature of work is changing because technology is bringing new opportunity, new ways to improve efficiency and productivity. And estimates from the World Economic Forum suggest that 65% of children entering school today will end up working in areas that don't even exist today. So, how do we tackle this? It's also changing the skills that people need. As Shabnam mentioned, the softer skills, the 21st century skills, technological know how, vocational skills, technical skills, but also problem solving, critical thinking, and softer skills such as adaptability, communication, collaboration, as we all are doing today on this Zoom uh, webinar session. At the same time, India has one of the world's largest pool of human resources with a surplus of 46 million working age people by some estimates. And there's a strong need to reinvent, reskill, upskill, and multi skill this workforce for this changing employment landscape and future of work, especially for new emerging sectors in logistics and food delivery, in fintech, the gig economy, where we are expecting more jobs to be created. This is the way, if we can figure out the ways to reinvent and reskill this workforce, we can be able to realize the potential of this large workforce. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has further shown us that there's challenges in the skilling sector. With global value chains disrupted, migrant labor left without any safety nets, unemployment soaring, we see that there's a lot to be done. On the positive side, a lot is being done by the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Skills Development to support the sector, and more can be done going forward. The bank is interested in this area because we are one of the largest financiers of education in the developing world. In the last fiscal year, 2020, the World Bank provided about $5.2 billion globally for education programs, technical assistance, and other projects designed to improve learning globally. And in this partnership with the private sector, with funding from private sector financiers, it's part of our effort at the World Bank to mobilize funding, ideas, and innovations from private and philanthropic actors to solve development challenges around the world. Because government resources and public sector resources alone cannot tackle the huge challenge we are facing today. So iSTAR is closely aligned with the World Bank Group and Government of India's STARS project, as Shabnam mentioned, and the recently launched National Education Policy in India, which has emphasized again the need for vocational education and skills for youth, employability, and entrepreneurship. So this initiative brings together government, donors, partners, education sector organizations such as yourselves to come together and realize India's demographic dividend. Now, for the next few minutes, we will focus on the specific priority areas of the iSTAR Challenge Fund launched this week, the eligibility and selection criteria, and the overall selection process to guide the applications. We will then open it up for Q&A, which my colleagues at AVPN will moderate. So with that, I'm going to request if we could move to the presentation. Thank you so much. If we could go to the first slide. Thank you. So as we mentioned, 3 focus areas: vocational skills, training, and education for youth. If we move to the next slide, yeah, perfect. The fund's focus areas. We're focusing on 3, the previous slide, please, Rachel. The fund is focusing on 3 basic areas. Building skills is the core part of the work. So building skills, whether it's technical, vocational skills, whether it's technology and digital skills, whether it's somewhat of the 21st century softer skills we talked about, collaboration, problem solving, leadership, or it's foundational skills, which are the numeracy, the literacy. That's one of the core areas of the Challenge Fund. The second core area is ecosystem development. How do kids and youth learn? How are they going to be able to have an environment where they can learn some of these skills and have hands-on experience? So if you're an organization that is equipping schools or learning labs with new digital equipment, if you're doing training of teachers or assessors, or using technology to do assessments in a different way, or counseling services for kids, for youth. And then the third area that we focus on in this challenge fund is income generation and improving opportunities for income generation. And how are we thinking about that? One is through entrepreneurship training, and second through internships, apprenticeships, linkages to on-the-job training. So youth can get the practical hands-on skills that they need to be able to succeed in the future of work. With that, I'll go to the next slide. What are the three types of funding that we are looking at in the Challenge Fund? We're looking at piloting a new innovative solution, service, or product with your existing target group. So you're an existing organization serving a certain target group, and you're going to be piloting a new innovative solution, service, or product, or targeting a new group or new geography. Second, you could be taking an existing concept or initiative and scaling it up, moving beyond a certain number of districts or beyond one state to a number of states. And finally, replication, taking a tested, true and tested concept and replicating it. You're already successfully deploying it, and now you can use iSTAR Challenge funds towards replication. The grant award is a maximum of $50,000, but I'd like to caveat that here. The evaluation committee is going to be looking at the budget and the proposals very carefully around innovation, scale, and replication, and your outcomes and targets. So I request each of you on this call today, if you're going to be submitting an application, please very carefully think through how much funding is actually required and the level of scale and the impact that you're going to be able to have on that on the ground, because that's one of
So
the criteria we will
Mohini,
be looking at.
yeah, if I can come in for a minute
Yes,
here,
please, Shabnam.
the funding thresholds will be as follows: between up till $10,000. That's one window. The second window will be, or rather, up to $0 to $15,000, $15,000 to $25,000, and then $25,000 up till $50,000. So this will be depending on the scale, on the quality of the product, on your association with government, the amount of deepening or the penetration that you have in the sector, and the ability to scale it up. So these will be, so we will inform about the exact windows, but there are going to be 3-4 windows. So up to a maximum of 50,000. So the windows we will exactly tell you, and what are the criteria for the windows. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shabnam, for clarifying that. And so again, just to emphasize what Shabnam said, please be very careful when you're applying for the application to not just put a blanket amount of $50,000 in there. And just to reiterate what she emphasized, the idea should be innovative, aligned to the future of work. Targeting gender or marginalized communities is an emphasis that we're having. Partnership with government, whether it's at the district level, at smaller scale level, municipal level, or the state level. And then finally, looking at a potential for scale. You may not scale it within the project, but it should have potential to scale going forward. So I'm going to move to the next slide and talk about the selection and eligibility criteria. So the eligibility criteria that we have set is basically qualifying organizations that apply should be Indian registered for-profit or non-for-profit entities. So it can be any organization that is a for-profit or non-for-profit that's registered in India. If you're not registered within India, because I know that ABPN has shared with us that there are international organizations that are part of this webinar session today, then the suggestion is to partner with a local Indian organization that is registered with a registered office within India. The organization should be at least in existence for 2 years minimum, and we would request you to upload your certification of registration as part of the application process. Then we would look at organizations that have a clear set of development outcomes. What are you hoping to achieve through the project? If we move to the next slide, as Shabnam mentioned, strong emphasis is on public-private partnerships, where we see that you already have an existing relationship with a government entity at any level. Those applications will be prioritized. Where you may not have yet, but you have been in discussion, please share evidence of that as well. And there is an opportunity to upload that information as part of the application. You are not disqualified if you don't have a partnership with government entity, but those applications will be prioritized. And finally, iSTAR funds should not be used towards starting up a new organization or starting up a new project or idea alone. It should be, you should have adequate funds to support your existing operations. And these funds would be used for incremental projects, as we mentioned, to take it to a new target group geography or potential for scale. With that, I'll move to the next slide, please, talking a little bit about the selection criteria. So again, in the selection criteria, we are looking at some of the things that the independent evaluators will be looking at, and I'll share with you the process on that in the next slides. But some of the things we'll be looking at is the clarity of the mission and how it aligns with some of the objectives that we have stated. The operational capabilities, so you have the ability to have the right group of people to deploy and execute the project. The monitoring and evaluation, or the achievement of outcomes and impact. You have clearly defined outcomes. What is your target market? What is the demand for this segment that you're trying to meet? Then your quality of partnerships, existing partnerships and alliances that you may have that will help you to deliver the project. And then we'll be looking at your budget and ability to scale. So the budget would look at, do you have financial resources for the organization currently? Is it a clearly articulated budget category for what the project is going to be doing? And then do you have an idea of how that project can be sustained going forward? So some of these things, if you can articulate in your applications, those are some of the things that the evaluation team will be looking at. And finally, the potential for scale. So again, just to reiterate what Shabnam has also mentioned and we said earlier, innovation aligned to the future of work, targeting women and disadvantaged communities, partnerships with government, and the potential for scale. These are some of the main things that will be prioritized as part of this process. I'll move to the next slide and just share a little bit about the process that we'll be using. So the Challenge Fund has opened on March 1st this week, and we are currently in the application phase where we're doing these information sessions and reaching out to different community organizations, education sector organizations, as well as government counterparts. The deadline for application submission is in 7 weeks on April 15th. The second step, once applications are submitted, will be the review process. This will be an initial scrubbing evaluation by an independent panel of technical experts, both internally evaluators from within the bank, but the majority will be external technical experts familiar with the sector. That process will happen in April, and then due diligence, where we go back to organizations that have come up in the initial shortlisting for further details and information that the team may require, will happen in April and May. We anticipate that the selection and awards announcement will happen in June. As part of that announcement, we will also have an orientation session describing the bank's procurement guidelines, monitoring and evaluation framework that you would be required to complete, and agreements, the grant agreements. That all will happen in June. It's expected to happen in June. And finally, once you are an applicant that has successfully received an award, there will be capacity building program that applicants will be invited to participate in, which will initiate in December, 6 months after you receive the award and begin execution. So now I'd like to go to the next slide, where all of the details that we have just shared with you are all available online at istar.org.in. You go to the top of the page and you'll see Challenge Fund. There's a ticker that shows you how many days are left for the application deadline. And all of the details that we've just described that Shabnam has talked about, that we have talked about, are included in the eligibility and selection criteria, along with frequently asked questions online. So if there's any questions that haven't been answered by the end of the day today, you could still go online and check out the website there. The process to sign up is first you register the organization. So you sign up at the top right of the page and register your organization, create a simple profile of what the organization does. You'll get a confirmation email that you've registered online, and then you'll have time to apply. So you can start your application and save it, and then continue to keep working on it. There are 5 main sections on the application, going over some of the details that we described above. So you can continue to work on that over the next 6.5 weeks left till April 15th. And finally, once you've completed, please submit. And please, you can go back to the scene. The application deadline is April 15th, midnight, Indian Central Time. So I'll go to the next slide now. The 3-step review process initially we'll be looking at eligibility, some of the eligibility criteria that we mentioned earlier, which is, are you a registered organization in India, legally registered organization? Have you been in existence for 2 years? Some of those eligibility criteria will determine whether you will move to the next phase of an assessment or not. If you don't meet the basic eligibility, we will send an email back to you and let you know that these are the reasons why.
Moini, one addition, FCRA clearance will be required.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Shabnam. And that was a question that came up actually to AVPN already. So thank you for answering that, because it was something that was on everyone's mind. So FCRA clearance will be required if you're an organization to be able to accept World Bank funds. And that will be part of the eligibility and a place where you can upload that as well. The second step will be the assessment, where once you've cleared the eligibility criteria round, the projects will be moved to the assessment, where we'll be looking at the type of uh, project description, the innovation, the potential for scale, whether you have the partnership with governments or not. What is the innovative idea, and really, is it aligned to the future of work? Or even if it's not aligned to purely future of work, is it building some of the skills required for the future of work? So that will be the assessment phase, which will be done by the independent external expert panel. And then we'll have the due diligence phase, as we mentioned, which will be only if we need to come back to you for any additional clarification and to determine any other capacity building needs that the organization might have. I'll move to the next slide, please. And once we're done with the 3-step review process, we'll move into selection and award. Final winners will be selected. They will be discussed internally by the committee and agreed on, and then an orientation will be held, and the awards will be announced via formal ceremony, which most likely might be held online, which is expected to be in June of this year. Moving to the next slide, capacity building, one of the points that we talked about. One of the, so some of the guiding principles behind the iSTAR Challenge Fund are the 2 decades of experience that the World Bank has had with Development Marketplace, which has been a funding mechanism that the World Bank has used globally and replicated in countries across the world. And what we found over the last 2 decades was that funding alone doesn't determine the success of projects and outcomes. In addition to funding, there are 2 other core components that are important for projects to succeed, and those are capacity building and monitoring and evaluation. So what do we mean by capacity building? Several organizations may have similar needs to understand how they can partner with government, how they can take their project to scale, how they effectively plan their human resources. So a number of areas can come up as part of the review process that will then be aggregated to determine common capacity building needs across the organizations. And then we'll be delivering these through e-learning modules and encouraging peer-to-peer learning as well, so that you can share good practices across other organizations that have won this award. So in addition to the funding, you'd also be part of a peer network and an opportunity to learn from other organizations working in skills and education. And then with that, I'll go to the final slide. So what are the background guiding principles defining the iSTAR Challenge Fund? It's demand driven and competitive. So you are determining what the applications will be. It's going to be a purely competitive process. It will be following a transparent evaluation and selection. Based on predefined eligibility and selection criteria, which is available publicly on the website. We are looking to fund projects that can be scaled up, replicated, and sustained over the longer term. Success to us over longer term, or what Shabnam has sort of mandated to us, is that can these projects be taken up by government to scale going forward? So it shouldn't just be that we have successfully delivered a project, but then there's no opportunity for scale. To be able to tackle the huge challenge that's facing us in India today amongst youth, we need to be able to take these projects to scale. Then emphasizing innovation in either the model, the process, the product. You could be doing something traditional, assessments, but are you doing it using a new technology that will drive efficiency, drive improvements? So innovation in models, processes, or products. And then we're encouraging you, when we're talking about the future of work, we're encouraging you to look at what is the industry connect from the design stage. Who is going to be taking up these skills? Is there a market for the skills that you're building amongst youth? And finally, the last 3 points are funding projects that are result based. So what I mentioned earlier, the monitoring and evaluation, and what Shabnam mentioned as well. We're going to be looking at outcomes to determine how much funding is allocated to each project. And we encourage you to nurture partnerships, both within other organizations, but especially with government at different levels. And then we'll be encouraging the sharing of knowledge. The reason we built a website dedicated to this challenge fund is so that we can share good practices, profile some of the organizations, and have everything online so that you can take advantage of it and share that information. So I will stop here. I'd like to just request Rachel if she could take us to the last slide on if you'd like to contact any of the World Bank team, and several of my team members, Shabnam and I spoke today, but several other team members that are working hard behind on this project are here as well. If you'd like to reach any of us, you can do so at iSTAR@worldbank.org. And that will go to a number of us, and we will respond within 24 hours to you. So I will hand it back over to Patsy now. Thank you so much for your attention, and we look forward, and we're excited about the number of organizations that have attended today, and we look forward to your applications and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Mohini. And between the chat box and the Q&A, I have to say lots of questions are coming in. And many of them about the conditions and of eligibility as well to apply for the grant. So they'll be very relevant, I think, for us to address. But before we dive into that, and I'll just give you a minute to catch your breath and maybe scroll through the Q&A box yourself as well before we get to it. Let's just take a moment to quickly ask the audience a second poll question. The first poll question that we had shared with you earlier asked you to share with us what you thought were the key priorities to address the skills gap challenge. The second question that I'd like to ask you now, if I could ask my colleague to please launch the second poll. Thank you. Is that, as you could hear earlier when Mohini was sharing, this idea of having strong public-private partnerships are going to be so critical for success in achieving the kinds of outcomes we seek in education in India. And we'd like for you to just share with us, what do you think is most needed to facilitate strong public-private partnerships? Encouraging engagement with relevant stakeholders, closing the language gap between private and public players, embrace project monitoring and evaluation. I think there could be also a case to be made that all three are also very important, but let's try to see what is coming out as being most top of mind for all of you. And for those who have already submitted your poll, I'll invite you again to look through the questions in the Q&A box, and please upvote the questions that you also feel are very important to you, and we'll try to address the questions that have the most votes first. We have also received, prior to this session, a fair number of inquiries coming in from interested organizations about the grant program already. So we will also be sharing with you some of those questions, Mohini, for you to answer them at this time, because we also feel like they will be questions that are relevant to the audience here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Patien and Shabnam. And yes, we can answer questions however you'd like. Would you like to select a few of the questions?
Well, let me maybe ask my colleagues to first close the poll so that we can share the written questions shortly. But just for everyone's information, in case you're wondering, encouraging engagement with relevant stakeholders has come out as tops, followed by closing the language gap between private and public sector players. And it's interesting also that these are the top two because quite clearly one of the reasons for us to have opportunities like the challenge grant is to indeed find different ways for different partners to work closely together. While my colleagues are going to prepare the questions that came in prior to this session, maybe Mohini and we can take a look at the live questions first and address some of those, and we'll go back to the questions that have come to us in writing beforehand right after this. So top voted question is, can organizations apply for prior permission for FCRA if they are chosen to move forward in the application after review? And I think Shabnam and Mohini, you were quite clear about what the FCRA requirements are. Would you like to address this question?
Shabnam, do you want to?
Mm,
Yeah, we basically, as Shabnam mentioned, FCRA is a requirement for you to be able to accept World Bank funds. So if you apply and while you're submitting the application process and you don't receive it before June, it would be difficult for you to execute the project over the next 18 to 24-month period. So I would say that it is important for you to already have the FCRA clearance. Shabnam, do you want to
Yes.
add?
Yeah, FCRA clearance is important because these are, even our partner, which is JP Morgan here, would like to have FCRA clearance, and that's a Ministry of Corporate Affairs requirement for entities to apply to, and we would like to follow that requirement. So, may I ask, is there any entity here which is not FCRA compliant?
Shabnam, I'm not sure if they have the ability to reply verbally, so I'll ask for those who wish to respond to Shabnam's question to please just put your answer into the chat box. Or raise your hand, whichever is easier.
We have 5 or 6 hands raised, Patien.
Yes,
Okay,
I can see
so
that. Yeah, a few of them here.
that's a challenge. So FCRA clearance will be critical for
And
shortlisting.
related to that question, Shabnam and Mohini, there are also some organizations here who are for-profit organizations. What is their eligibility to apply for the grant and any related regulatory constraints they should be aware of?
You want me to come here, Mohini?
Yeah, sure, Shabnam. So
I
same.
think you should go ahead, please. Mohini, you take the questions.
Yeah, so everyone has to be FCRA clearance required, even for and that is part of the rules for. I mean, we can come back to you if you'd like for us to check, but the FCRA clearance is required, one, to be able to accept the World Bank funds, and second, as Shabnam mentioned, that it's a requirement that JP Morgan, our partner and donor organization, needs as well. So we'd like to follow those processes. If you have a specific application already in place and you have a question around, and some time frame that you're thinking that it would happen before June, then please send us an email at istar@worldbank.org, and so that we can flag your application.
So
Whatever
one
you
question,
haven't.
the question which was there over here, whether private sector for-profit interventions will be allowed. As of now, we are keeping the for-profit sector also.
I'm sorry, Shabnam, your audio broke up a little bit. You were saying about the for-profit sector?
The for-profit sector, as of now, we've allowed, with the understanding that if there are any kind of any pending cases or any pending government regulations that have that have been kind of not followed, then we will want that transparent information upfront.
Thank you, Shabnam. And I can see also in the chat box, there's a question about related to international organizations that may wish to apply for an opportunity with this grant. And Mohini, it relates to also another question that's in the Q&A box. Maybe you could address this in a two-part manner. The first part is that if there is a partnership that international applicants may want to form with a local Indian organization, what type of partnerships are we talking about? Would it be an MOU type of partnership you're looking for, or will a letter of support suffice? And secondly, will the Indian organization that they're partnering with have to have FCRA as well?
Yeah, so
Yes.
I'll take this one. So the Indian
Sure.
organization that's going to be applying will have to be FCRA cleared, and the application will come from the Indian organization. If you're partnering with it, you can be partnered together, you can apply, but the lead partner will become the Indian organization.
Exactly. And there's a place in the application form where you can say lead partner, primary applicant, and secondary. But yeah, as Shabnam mentioned, the lead would have to be the Indian-based organization that's registered and has FCRA clearance.
Thank you very much. There is also a question about the states that will be in collaborating partners. This is a question that's from Saranj Vaswani, where the question comes up in the form about the number of states where the current program is operational, where applicants are asked to select the states that this program is operational in. They currently have a project operational in Delhi, but it's not on the list of options. So could you share a bit of guidance about how they should respond to that? Will there be an opportunity to include Delhi as one of the states, or will that not be considered in the application?
So yes, priority will be given to STAR state. So the project that Shabnam mentioned that we are aligned to, the strengthening teachers training and the STARS program with the government of India. So the STARS, 6 stars straight, which are listed on the website as well. But Delhi should be part of the list, and it can be because there is a national component. And where we are saying that there is an emphasis on STARS states, projects, the 6 star states, what we're not saying we're disqualifying anyone else. What we're saying is those would be prioritized. So we want to make sure that those are at least covered as part of the work that's being done through the iSTAR Challenge Fund. But Delhi should be an option, and I will double check that on the application form. And if it's not included in the list for some reason, we will make sure to add that in. Thank you for that feedback.
One sec. Delhi is a state government,
Yeah,
which is not of part of STARS.
STARS, right.
So yeah, so the priority, as Mohini was mentioning, will be given to STARS states. Delhi, etc., will come as second priority. So we will first go with the STARS states.
Thank you very much for answering that, Mohini. It looks like there are more questions coming in as well, more specific to some of the solutions and impact theory that will come with these applications. But before I get to that, can I just quickly also raise one more question that came up, which is interesting. How about improving governance skills for local professional developers in India under the PMAY scheme for affordable housing? Would this type of work qualify as skills development in the context of this grant?
Okay, so can you repeat that, Patsyan?
The question is, will improving governance skills for local and professional developers in India under the PMAY scheme for affordable housing, PMAY being an acronym, unfortunately my pronunciation in Hindi is very bad, I won't attempt it. It looks like a scheme that looks to encourage more.
Yes,
Yeah.
We're aware of the screen. Yes, everyone. Yes. Thank you.
Does that qualify as skills development? That's the question.
So improving governance skills for the affordable housing sector, governance skills of employees, or
Could I ask Mr. Well, no, I shouldn't assume your gender. Could I ask the participant who raised that question to please elaborate on that in the chat box, and we'll try to come back to this question later on. Okay.
Yes, and then in the meantime, I put in the chat box the priority star states so that everyone is aware. It's in the chat box. Maharashtra, Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan. It's also on our website.
Excellent. Okay, so there are some more questions here coming in about beneficiary criteria and a little bit more questions about the kinds of solutions that qualify. So first question is the beneficiary criteria just for youth, including women, including marginalized youth who are transitioning from school to work? And I suppose the follow on to that is, would there be other other criteria for the beneficiaries that would, whose project will qualify for this application?
So Patien, that is correct, that is the priority area. So school to work transition, vocational skills, which typically students are taking in high school, so 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, recent graduates. So if you just recently graduated from 12th and you're working on an intervention for recent graduates to enter the workforce, so that all applies in the school to work transition. The NEP, also National Education Policy of the Government of India, also talks about introducing the world of work or exposure to the world of work to earlier years, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So even that you could submit an application if you're working around that, but priority, of course, will be given to vocational skills building or any of this ecosystem development or income generating opportunities for high school and recent graduates. That's the school to work transition. Emphasis on women, inclusion, uh, disability, people with disabilities, challenges, marginalized communities is of course prioritized as well.
Thank you very much there, Mohini. The next two questions are kind of related. So there is a question here about whether social emotional competencies such as cooperation, resilience, and so forth, do they fall under skills for future of work? And there's also a question asking if there are any descriptive concept notes from the bank that can elaborate on what we mean by building skills, ecosystem, and income generation, which can potentially help the applicants decide what can and cannot be included in their applications, or should this be on an open basis based on what the organizations are interpreting these terms to mean?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. And back to the first, which the socioeconomic, the building resilience, all of those do qualify as building skills. Those are some of the 21st century skills that we talked about that are very important for youth to be able to be familiar with, to be able to transition to the world of work successfully, and especially in the future of work. So yes, that does qualify in the building skills category. We don't have any notes uploaded currently around this. The bank is working on, looking at a longer term study on skills gap, because the skills gap studies that are currently available are slightly outdated. So we are working on that. But what we can do is look at if there's some information that we could post online to clarify. We do have short descriptions on our website describing the different categories that you can apply for. Now, they're not concept notes, they're not full documents, they're short descriptions, but I can look at if we have additional information that we could use to upload
Now, what we
online.
can do is we can provide access to the World of Work, the World Development Report. Secondly, we can provide the CMO pad. These are the areas. In fact, it's very good education and very good learning experience for whoever reads it. And the STARS pad can also be linked to our projects to the website, so that you get a good holistic sense of what we are looking at in terms of skilling. Especially the Skill India mission operation will give you a sense of what we are talking about skilling, but here it's more related to the school to work transition schooling segment. So the age group would be up to, say, 18 to 25. I mean, not even 25, but around up to 18. But then you could have assessors, you could have trainers, you could have all those kinds of programs.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shabnam, for that. And actually, as Shabnam mentioned, that there are several reports that the bank has issued around this topic that are part of the website. So on istar.org.in, if you go into resources, you'll see the latest World Development Report is posted there. We have the project documents for the STARS project, the CMO project. The publicly available documents are posted there. And you can look through those, as Shabnam mentioned, to get additional information on the thinking behind some of these areas.
Thanks very much, Mohini and Shabnam. There are some questions here about where and how the funds will be directed. There's a question about whether the funds that will be awarded will be channeled through the government, and another asked if the funds whether the funds whether there can be other complementary funding schemes that would support the application as well if the intent was for the project to be scaling up into new operational areas.
Sorry, Patsy, I broke up for a second. The first question you
The first question
mentioned
was,
was,
can you hear me clearly now, Mohini?
yes, I can. I'm sorry, it was my end.
No worries. The first question was whether the funds to be awarded will it be channeled through governments before
Yes.
it arrives at the entity. I think the answer is yes. And
No,
then
sorry, I meant yes, I heard the question.
oh, sorry. Then please go ahead and answer. Thank you.
Yes, so the funds will not be channeled through the government. This is a World Bank managed program. It's called the Multi-Donor Trust Fund, where a private entity has parked funds with the World Bank to be able to implement this program as part of their CSR, corporate social responsibility, uh, and philanthropy work in this education and skills space. So it's channeled directly from the World Bank to the organization themselves and not through the government.
Thank you, Mohini. And there was another question with respect to applicants whose projects may be mobilizing more than just the grant amount that this program is currently offering. Would there be other forms of complementary funding schemes that can support this that they may look at?
Shabnam, do you want to talk on that?
Sure. So if you can leverage more funds from somewhere else, that's fine. I mean, but we cannot provide more funds than what we're offering right now. But if you want to leverage funds from other donor sources and stuff, that's fine. So that should be acceptable.
And that will show the different partnerships and things that you have as part of the application. So, but parallel schemes right now, there are none that will be in tandem with this. Down the road, there could be other opportunities that come up, but right now there's nothing that would be, in addition to the iSTAR funds.
Great, thank you very much, Mohini and Shabnam. There is a question also about submitting in one proposal 2 different projects with the option for the bank to choose which one to fund. Is that an option for them? Is that a possibility for applicants to submit in that way?
We put this on the website in our frequently asked questions as well, which is we would prefer that each organization submit only one application, just in the interest of making sure that it should be the best proposal that you think is most relevant given the criteria that we've just described here. And each organization should ideally only submit one application.
Thank you very much, Mohini. There are quite a number of questions still coming in about the background and context between the grant and the STARS project, which, as I understand, people who have questions about that, you can refer to the website, istar.org.in. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the chat history in the chat box, I'm sure our colleagues will be happy to type it in again. There were also questions about what are the priority STARS states. That's also in the chat box. But if you, again, haven't had a chance to look at the history, they are Maharashtra, Kerala, Himachal, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan. And all of which is also provided on the istar.org.in website. I'd like to just look at one last question now, Mohini and Shabnam, and then maybe we can defer the rest of these questions to a bit of reorganization by AVPN, and we'll try to put up some consolidated written answers to everybody on the event page as well. We'll also want to encourage everyone to please refer to the FAQs that are on the iSTAR website, which is quite comprehensive. The last question I wanted to ask, and it seems to be upvoted many, many times, is the application form. There is a question about whether a particular template for detailed budget calculation is available. I'm not sure, Mohini, if you can address that question.
Yes, there is a detailed budget template. It's a sample template that is available for the different budget criteria that is there. So civil works and construction and other things related to schools or infrastructure development is not permitted as part of the bank's procurement guidelines. And that's included in the application form, the categories that you can apply for funding under. And there's a template that you can download and then fill out and then upload again as part of your application. So that's part of the application process. So it's a 5-step application process. We'd encourage you to get started, set up the organization profile, and then complete it as you go along because it may be a lot to complete in one single sitting. You may need to upload a few different documents. So that's why it's a 7-week window that we have the applications open for. And we're having the information session early on. If you continue to have questions, you can reach out to our team. In addition to Shabnam and myself, as I mentioned, there are several other colleagues that are also on the call and the webinar today that could help, and so we could reach out to us on the website to ask further questions.
Excellent, Mohini. Thank you so much for answering that question as well. I'm mindful that we are 1 minute to the end of this session now, so I'd like to request that any further questions or inquiries that people have which are not yet answered on the website, to please feel free to reach out to the email address that Mohini has provided, or you can contact your AVPN representative that you know well, and we will be happy to also direct the inquiry to the World Bank team. Mohini and Shabnam, any last comments from you, given that there are still so many questions? I think we'll be quite busy answering them after the session. But any last comments for everybody online before we wrap up the session today?
Yeah, so the presentation that Mohini has made, we will upload it onto the iSTAR website. And in that, we will be adding the thresholds so that there's more clarity on what thresholds we are talking about. And the selection criteria will slowly be also uploaded. But that's it from me, Mohini.
Thank you so much. I think it's really exciting to see so many organizations online today. We're excited by your enthusiasm and interest towards this. And, we were thinking about this project has been underway for some time, and it's exciting to see that it launches now. And we look forward to receiving your applications and going through this process over the next few months. Thank you so much, Patsy, for coordinating this.
No worries. Thank you so much also to everyone who is registered and dialed in. We're really excited to also already see questions asking about what types of partnerships with states will be relevant for eligibility and application as well. So that tells us that indeed the state partnerships intent is in the right place. So we are excited to see the applications come in. Thank you all for your time and attention. And thank you very much, World Bank team, Shabnam, Mohini, Kanupriya, and everybody else that's online. We have had a lot of questions answered today, but we will continue to work on the ones that haven't yet been addressed. And we'll invite everybody to please check out the iSTAR website or the AVPN event website where you registered, because the information that we talked about today will also be shared on both of those websites as well. Thank you everyone for your attention, and we hope that you will have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much now. Goodbye.